It is April the 10th, 1957, and on a dark street in the suburbs of Buenos Aires, Argentina, one of the Second World War's most brutal leaders is about to get his comeuppance. As he walks home, he senses the presence of an enemy not far behind him. Drawing a pistol and turning to face his foe, a rush of adrenaline and reciprocative storm of bullets ends with the dictator in a crumpled heap on the floor, barely clinging to life. His name is Ante Pavelic, and he once held a reputation as one of Hitler's most bloodthirsty allies. During the war, he governed an Axis puppet state named the Independent State of Croatia, or NDH, carved out of the ruins of the Yugoslavia that he so deeply hated. He and his fascist political party, the Ustasha, quickly turned the new state into a horrifying killing machine, committing atrocities against the country's Serbs, Jews, Roma, and political opponents. Under Pavelic's watch, this reign of terror had claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Now, halfway across the world, his crimes had finally caught up with him in an act of vengeance. Although he narrowly survived this late-night attack, it was one from which he would never fully recover. Today we look at the assassination attempt of Ante Pavelic, Hitler's brutal ally who could run from his crimes no longer. Who was this notorious war criminal, this sometimes forgotten ally of Nazi Germany, and what led to him being hunted down and shot so far away from home? This long and bloody road that led Ante Pavelic towards totalitarianism and genocide begins in the year 1918 with the end of the First World War. Out of the ashes of the defeated powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary, new nations sprung up all over Europe, including one in the Balkans named the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes. This country had been dreamt of as a way to unite the South Slavic people who are now free from the empires that once ruled them. However, for various complicated reasons, ethnic tensions between the different groups became a significant problem, not least those between the Croats and the Serbs. From the very start, one of those in the Croatian camp agitating against the new state was one Ante Pavelic. Fiercely opposed to Yugoslavia's Serbian king and determined to rip Croatia away from what he saw as a Serb-dominated country, Pavelic quickly came to the attention of the authorities. When the assassination of a Croatian politician named Stjepan Radic brought Croat-Serb relations to a new low, the King Alexander I decided that it was time to fight fire with fire. In 1929 he dissolved parliament, banned political parties, and made himself a royal dictator. He also renamed the country Yugoslavia and created brand new provinces or Banovinas to try and force the creation of a new collective identity, thinking that he would show those squabbling nationalists who was boss. Unsurprisingly, this only made everything worse, and soon Pavelic was in exile in Italy where he began to build a new radical group that would one day act as the machinery of his brutal killing spree, the Ustasha. Partially inspired by their Italian hosts and later by Nazi Germany, this radical nationalist group's approach was one of violence to try and rip Yugoslavia apart. In 1932, their newspaper proclaimed, "The knife, revolver, machine gun and time bomb. These are the bells that will announce the dawning and the resurrection of the independent state of Croatia." True to their word, the Ustasha quickly began setting up terrorist training camps and capitalizing on Yugoslavia's ethnic tensions to grow their ranks. It didn't take long for them to shake the foundations of the kingdom that they so deeply hated, for in 1934, the Ustasha claimed the ultimate scalp, assassinating the king himself whilst on a visit to Marseille. Under considerable pressure, the reluctant Italians did put Pavelic in prison for a short time, but he was still safe from the repercussions that would await him back home, and he could afford to simply bide his time and wait for the Ustasha's next big opportunity. With the outbreak of the Second World War, that opportunity soon arose. In April 1941, Nazi Germany invaded Yugoslavia. As parts of the country were quickly carved and swallowed up by the Axis powers like hungry vultures, in the centre a new puppet state was established, the independent state of Croatia. The Ustasha were put in charge, and Pavelic set course for home, ready to unleash the horrors that would define his poisonous legacy. The case of Pavelic coming to power in the NDH was a curious one. Although ideologically somewhat similar to the Nazi German occupiers, the Germans had actually preferred to place a more moderate leader in charge of the country. They wanted someone who would have legitimacy among the Croatian people and cause them as few headaches as possible. When it was clear that this wasn't going to happen, they turned to Pavelic and the Ustasha. Giving himself the title of Poglavnik as a Croatian equivalent to Führer, Pavelic's reign of terror was now ready to begin. This puppet state that he ruled was much larger than the Croatia that we know today, counting within its borders the entire territory of Bosnia-Herzegovina and also parts of Serbia. Thus, the country had a large population of ethnic Serbs, and fueled by the Ustasha belief in Serbian racial inferiority as well as by old ethnic tensions, these Serbs became the main target of the Ustasha's genocidal rampage. Now before going further with this, it is very important to note that the Ustasha were not the only ones committing wartime atrocities in the broader territory of Yugoslavia. The two other main factions of the nationalist Serbian Chetniks and communist Yugoslav partisans were also responsible for war crimes of their own, but as this video is focused on Pavelic, we will primarily be looking at those committed by the Ustasha. As for the Ustasha's policy towards the ethnic Serbs within the NDH's borders, it is often cited as kill a third, deport a third, and convert a third to Catholicism. It wouldn't be long before death camps would emerge all over the NDH like a plague, and along the banks of the Sava River appeared the most notorious one of all, Jasenovats. This death camp would become a poison symbol of Pavelic's twisted rule. For unlike anywhere else in occupied Europe, NDH camps were not operated by Nazi Germany, but by the Ustasha themselves, and were characterised by a sickening brutality. The Jasenovats complex grew to become one of the largest death camps in Europe, and inmates faced horrifying hand-to-hand executions via knives, blunt objects, axes, and most notoriously via a bladed glove known as a Serb cutter. Whilst the Serbs constituted the largest group of victims, they were not the only target of the Ustasha's killing spree. Between 1941 and 1945, the Jewish and Romani populations of the NDH were also decimated. Croats and Bosniaks who opposed Pavelic's regime, especially supporters of the partisans, also faced a similar fate. In fact, the Nazis themselves even took issue with Pavelic's unhinged and chaotic killing spree. While some Nazi administrators such as Edmund Gleiser-Horstenau openly admitted their disgust with the Ustasha's methods, a broader reason for this opposition was simply because the Ustasha were making Germany's job of controlling the country much more difficult. For their methods were pushing not only persecuted Serbs, but also an increasingly large number of Croats into the arms of the Yugoslav partisans. The partisan ranks swelled, and they became an ever larger headache for Hitler and the Nazi leadership, who by now were on the defensive and could ill afford any distractions. But in spite of this, the killings continued. Estimates of how many ethnic Serbs were victims of the NDH genocide range from 200,000 to 500,000, or often even more. An estimated 3/4 of Croatia's 39,000 strong Jewish community were also victims, in what was proportionally one of the war's most lethal genocides. But Pavelic's rule and the very fabric of the fascist axis that had once held much of Europe in a chokehold was now beginning to unravel. Whilst the Soviets and Western allies were busy rolling back the frontiers of the Third Reich towards its ultimate collapse, the Yugoslav partisans cemented themselves as one of the war's most successful resistance movements by bringing down Pavelic's government. With the Ustasha defeated, Pavelic fled to save his own skin, being ever chased by the inescapable spectre of retribution. As the NDH perished into dust and was reintegrated into a new communist Yugoslavia, the once dictatorial Ante Pavelic was now in hiding. Beginning in Austria, he retraced his path from decades before and crossed over into Italy. As he gradually tiptoed his way to Rome, British and American intelligence actually became aware of his presence, but seemingly weren't interested in pursuing an arrest. This time, of course, Pavelic didn't have Mussolini to protect him, but this deeply Catholic fugitive soon found another source of shelter, the Vatican. But with Yugoslavia's new communist government keen to make him face justice, it was clear that Pavelic would need to go just a bit further afield if he were to remain a free man. Via his Vatican connections and a broader network of fascist sympathisers throughout Europe, he soon took advantage of the rat lines, escape routes to help notorious Axis war criminals flee to South America. Using a Red Cross passport under the false name of Pablo Araños, Pavelic set sail for the rat line's ultimate destination, Argentina. Now, after arriving in 1948, you'd think that he might lie low in Argentina, and although he continued to use a false name, in other ways he very much didn't. Other than establishing relations with Argentine President Juan Perón, the man who had opened his country to fleeing war criminals in the first place, Pavelic also once again started agitating against the new Yugoslavia, who continued to seek his extradition. The Argentine authorities in turn decided to play dumb and pretend that Pavelic was elsewhere, and even after Perón fell from power in 1955, the Yugoslav government's progress in bringing Pavelic to justice was still effectively zero. But little did they know that the lid on the Pavelic case was about to be blown wide open, for others were also out looking for revenge. And this is what brings us to that late night in a Buenos Aires suburb on April the 10th, 1957. Pavelic had been out with other Ustasha emigres to celebrate the 16th anniversary of the NDH's establishment. It was on his return home that he was all of a sudden haunted by the sense that somebody was following him, an assassin stalking his prey. Sensing the danger, the paranoid Pavelic spun around and began wildly firing his pistol in the stalker's direction. Then turning and attempting to run, the shadowy figure chased him down and returned fire. 2 bullets quickly ripped through the dictator's body, and within seconds he was a crumpled heap on the floor, at the mercy of the shooter. This silhouetted figure was a man named Blagoje Jovovic, a successful hotel owner and former Chetnik who had emigrated to Argentina after the war. In a plot with other Serbs and Montenegrins living in the country, Jovovic had learned of Pavelic's whereabouts and was determined to take him down once and for all. Their motive? Revenge for the Ustasha's genocidal rampage against the Serbs. Jovovic now had the Butcher of the Balkans exactly where he wanted him, but in a moment of hesitation he did not finish the job, fleeing the scene with Pavelic still alive. But the wheels of retribution were by now set in motion, for both Argentina and the world's attention was back on Pavelic, and the Argentine authorities could no longer pretend that he was elsewhere. As Yugoslavia moved swiftly to once again request his extradition, Pavelic fled to Chile, his wounds still untreated. He soon moved on to Franco's Spain, and although he once again seemed hidden from the world in the metropolis of Madrid, he could run from his fate no longer. On December the 28th, 1959, the Butcher of the Balkans and one of Hitler's most brutal allies finally died at the age of 70. It had taken 2.5 years, but Jovovic's bullets had done the job. Jovovic's role in the death of one of the Second World War's most brutal leaders was actually unknown for decades afterwards, only coming to light when he himself revealed it to the world in the late 1990s. He died in Argentina in 1999, and today in the Serbian capital of Belgrade, there is a mural memorializing his act of vengeance. As for Ante Pavelic, his name is still of course well known in the Balkans, but in much of the rest of the world he seems to be relatively forgotten. It is vitally important of course that the knowledge of his crimes and the immense suffering in the NDH do not slip from collective memory. A man who joined forces with the Axis for his own hideous agenda and built up a puppet regime responsible for truly horrifying atrocities. They were, of course, atrocities for which Pavelic was never brought to justice. Today, the main camp of Jasenovac serves as a memorial to all those who suffered at the hands of the Ustasha. The stone flower at its heart symbolises rebirth, a new beginning, but all without forgetting the brutal legacy of Ante Pavelic and all its bloodshed. As always, we hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more from the Assassinations Archive.